In the context of truth, we have been misinformed about the definition of addiction. Addiction is not singular. Addiction is not an individual disease. Addiction is a family disease. One person may use, but the whole family suffers. No one comes out of the haze of addiction unscathed. Until recently, I have carried an insurmountable weight within me, one consisting of whys, whats, and hows developed from my past. The origin of these questions comes from a fragile, blonde-haired boy who worshipped his father, a father submitted to addiction. Heroin wrote his story and corrupted mine. Heroin filled his heart and fatigued mine. Heroin freed his soul and seized mine. Heroin stole my father from me. Now, my father's addiction didn't begin with heroin. In fact, it never truly had a beginning. It had just been with him from the very start. From a child, he was predisposed to his addiction through his estranged Vietnam veteran alcoholic father. Their relationship was far from the Brady Bunch episode my father envisioned it would be, and it instead consisted of a barrage of abuse and fighting day in and day out. An untroubled kid defiled by his father's addiction, the certainty of uncertainty left him alone in this life to discover his purpose, his truth. What was once perceived as love in his life quickly turned to hate, faith to doubt, patience to frustration, and compassion to anger. He learned to fight, to steal, and indulge in anything that gave him a rush to escape his solitude. Drugs and violence polluted his perception of life, which in turn became his reality, and a wall of isolation was built to protect himself. Only the truth is he was the only one guarding it. Now, for as much as my father grew up to resent his father, it is ironic that his future would follow the same track as his. He played baseball and excelled, so his father's dream could live vicariously through him. He enlisted in the Army and became a vigilant leader like his father in Nam, and worked his career in automobile factories like his father before him. The only difference is when he reached what seemed like his peak at Ford Motor Company, his journey to finding his truth would alter his and his family's lives to be completely. Now the automobile industry was no stranger to drugs, and in fact, most of the cars produced on those lines during the early 2000s were by some dude coming off an 8-ball he snorted earlier in the morning. It is important that at this point in time we recognize that my father was addicted to Vicodin, oxycodone, and a heavy drinker, though none of these were considered addictions to him as they weren't problems. He had a $30,000 car. He drove to his high-paying job in his tailored polo shirts. So what if he had some help in getting through the day? He kept this same thought process the day he was approached by someone who worked under him and was offered what was explained to him as Vicodin, but 100 times better. Of course, an unbeknown addict to him, he was going to say yes. He had always said yes, no matter the guilt trip he felt inside. In fact, had he learned to say no, I wouldn't have much of a speech to give to you today. Drugs and violence polluted my father's perception of life, which in turn became his reality. My father quickly took that pumped-up Vicodin he was given and took it to his office, where him and his using buddy quickly analyzed it to be none other than the notorious heroin. Neither of them cared, so long as it delivered what was promised. Snorted with ease, the line was a bluff, a bullet of lifelong dependency dodged. Yet my father went back to get what he was promised. This was the start of his end. Now, up until this point, my father had no purpose, no truth. Heroin gave him both. He became entranced with this girl with golden eyes. As she spoke to him in Persian, he let her in his veins and trusted her with his life. He had found the security he longed for, and she became his truth. Dope carried my father in lustrous arms for years to come. His daily routine started and ended not by a clock, but with his high. He went on to marry his beloved high school sweetheart and created 2 beautiful children whom he loved, but not with his whole heart, as that already belonged to the girl with golden eyes. As a child, he protected me from everything but himself. He prayed routinely, day in and day out, that all the pain his kids must endure in this lifetime, that God send to him instead. But he was the source of it all. As a joyful child, I watched as my sick father slowly drugged himself to death, taking his life and his family's with him. Countless tears contoured my mother's face. Verbal abuse rang through silent walls, and a boy waiting on his father's return found comfort in his ghost. Now, I never second-guessed his absence nor resented him. I was a child. My heart mended easily, no matter the turmoil I witnessed. But I only ever wondered why. Why was he gone? Why was Mom upset? Why were we not enough for him to stay home? Well, the truth is my father was a sick man. His actions sanctioned by insane logic, deduced by a sick mind. He was a master liar, but his lies were only ever to himself. Heroin chiseled away at his faith, and his life became dependent on his high. Money for the bills became a dope dealer's fortune, and his family fell to second in his hierarchical torment with her, the girl with golden eyes. He tried to hide his pain from his family and his addiction, and felt successful in his attempts, though this was far from the reality he produced for us. Addiction is the most narcissistic disease. One of the main aspects of addiction is singularity. Its subjectivity, indeed, is closely guarded by that of the addict. My father configured it was best if he endured his pain alone, yet his violent withdrawals created more pain for us than he could have ever spilled upon us. From rehab to rehab, he had always found his way back to the clinic. He was a successful middle-class addict who had access and excess. One was too many, and 1,000 was never enough. In fact, in his short trials at rehab, the counselors would refer to their groups as penguins. As we know, penguins travel in packs, and if you were to drop them alone in Antarctica, they'd instinctively find their way home and back to their spouse. If you dropped my father alone in Antarctica, he'd instinctively find the penguin with the dope. This was just the way he operated. He knew deep down he was sick, but he had surrendered his free will a long time ago and learned to practice acceptance. It wasn't until after rehab that he faced his lingering angst face to face. His kids, who have been without their daddy for weeks, how would they be perceived by him? These questions ate at his aching soul. Would they hate me for what I've done? Do they know I'm still here? Would I be accepted back? These questions ran and ran through his mind until those school doors opened and his arms were filled with his children. And without missing a beat, dismissive of his past, he was showered with unfaltering love. Love superior to any high the girl with golden eyes induced. In that moment, he found his truth in us. Not his relative or subjective truth, his truth. My father was a sick man, but he had found his truth, not through the light within the golden girl, but the light within his children's eyes. From that moment, he stopped apologizing to the devil and walked every day through hell so that his kids may have a chance at the life he never got. Brittle and broken, he did this over and over, and fragile doesn't even come close to describing the pain he was in. Recovery is not a cure. It's a daily reprieve, a stay of execution to which he lives through till this day. Now, I grew up worshiping my father until I no longer could. The whys, whats, and hows of my childhood lingered within me, and I grew to resent my father, much like how he grew to resent his. It was easy for me to blame him and hard to forgive him, and I think it's this way for most victims of addiction. My father was a truly sick man. My father was truly an addict, and I knew the truth for what it was. The truth was that he was an addict, and that was that. My childhood was filled with pain created by the monster that my father was. Key term was. However, as I've continued my journey to pursuing my own truth in this world, I've realized the truth I'd grown to know was subjective in the essence of my past. The real truth is that my father is an addict, but he is also a great father, a great leader, and my best friend. I've been a victim to scenes no kid should have to witness, yet I never had to worry about what was for dinner that night. I always had the nicest cleats and mitts, whether on the gridiron or the baseball diamond. I learned respect, integrity, personal courage, and loyalty through his commitment to raising me the correct way. I learned to turn hate into love, doubt into faith, frustration into patience, and anger to compassion. My life could have easily panned out the same as my father's. 2 children belittled by addiction, scurrying to find their purpose, their truth. My father's truth and life died within the grasp of the girl with golden eyes and was rekindled through the light he found in his child's eyes. And that is okay. For truth is like a blade, and it does not become strong until it has been through the fire several times. The flames of this fire burnt him and will burn all of you again and again, time after time. But those who embrace the flames, those who embrace the journey, will be forged their truth in time. Thank you.